Welcome to Salcedo Paranormal. It is Sunday, August 7th, 2022, and tonight we'll be sharing true paranormal stories from the web. One moment here, I just gotta check on one thing. And, uh, okay, just had to check on one thing. But as always, you can find all of the episodes of the show, along with links to social media, ways to donate, and ways to contact me at the podcast page. And that is salcidoparanormal.podbean.com. That's SALSIDO paranormal.podbean. I think it's the wrong first time. Either way, it's SALSIDO paranormal.podbean.com. Maybe I had it right. I don't know. Anyway, either way, all the links are always in the episode description, so you can find it that way too. So, um, and always happy to hear from you all, whether you have comments or questions or topic suggestions, or if you have stories of paranormal experiences, whether they're your own or from others that you trust. Happy to share those either by reading them or having you join me on the show to talk about them. So tonight we'll be doing true paranormal stories from the web. Wednesday will be another review show of something or other. We'll see what happens with that when it gets closer. And then Friday will be more paranormal news. Really had fun yesterday doing the extra show, and I'll do that as often as I can. It'll probably still just be once in a while, but that was nice. So, and I'm very happy that tonight I will not be talking about these stories myself. I want to welcome Jen H to the show. Happy to have you here again.
Hey, James, can you hear me okay?
Yes, yep, everything seems good.
Good deal. Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, well, the last time was a lot of fun, and everyone, including myself, really liked having you on the show and your ideas about the stories and everything. And so I'm glad we get to do this again. So thank you.
Yeah, of course, me too.
So let me get to these stories here, and I will start reading them, and we'll go from there. So, and I just found these this morning. Um, so they're not all super long. There's a couple that are longer than others, but I thought they were all actually. This is a really neat batch of stories. I was lucky to find them. So let me get started on this first story. Uh, so let me see here. Go back to the file. Okay, so this first story says, I was a bit south of Bar Harbor, Maine. It was a rolling fog. It was pretty thick, but clear as day, I saw an old schooner. Looked like something out of a pirate movie. I thought, hey, my wife would love this. I take a picture of the schooner, but when I look at the picture, no ship. I look at the photo and back at the ship about 3 times. And the last time I looked back, the schooner was gone. I have the photo of where the ship was supposed to be. And that's where that story ends. So what do you think of that, Jen?
I think that I haven't heard a good like ghost ship story in a long time. And I think that it's incredibly spooky that the location and everything and that whole region, well, basically the whole ocean, if you think about it, must be incredibly, I mean, the ocean would be perfectly haunted. If you think about all the different ships that have gone down and how many people have died at sea. And the ghost ship idea in and of itself, the parallel there between not just being an abandoned ship, but like a phantom ship, an apparition of a ship. It's almost even creepier. It reminds me of that story of the Flying Dutchman, is which is like the one famous ghost story about ships, where it's like the ship is doomed to sail the seas for like eternity, essentially. But you hear all these different accounts of ships going down or ships actually coming into port and they're completely empty of their entire crew. So many people die out at sea. I would imagine that probably one of the most terrifying ways to die, really, is just being out in the vast ocean and knowing that there's no land anywhere. And so, like just a watery grave. And there's so many stories about these types of phantom ships, people seeing them, um, or even just like the Titanic, that whole region up there around Newfoundland, that people report seeing orbs and stuff. So I think the ocean absolutely could be haunted. And I wonder I wonder if it was, I don't know, it could be either that it was an apparition of a ship, or it could be like even um maybe, I don't know, actually this kind of sounds like they saw a phantom ship, doesn't it?
It does, and I've like you, I've heard of stories of this before, but I've never found one on a in a forum like this, online like this, where it was actually a more recent experience like that. I've heard of stories over the years, but yeah, I thought that was really amazing to find that story, and that experience with it not showing up on the picture. That is also amazing.
Yes, it is. So I mean, they definitely, their eyes either, I don't know, they believe they saw it enough to take a picture of it. So I think that they did see something. And I believe very much so that it's very possible that the oceans are haunted by these types of phantom ships. It would make sense considering many of them have never, like, ships just disappear at sea many times and they're never seen again. Or they'll leave ships, the whole crew is deceased in some way, and they'll still have those ships just wandering the oceans. So I think it's very likely that they could have seen one of these ghost ships people talk about so frequently. And I think the oceans are definitely haunted.
Yeah, Derek in the chat here says there's a whole mythology about oceans and haunted and being haunted and things like that, like keepers of the deep that will attack divers and spirits being trapped if they die out in the ocean. And he also mentioned he apparently, and I've forgotten at this point because it's been so long. Apparently he requested a um some kind of show about nautical nightmares, as he calls it, and a while ago. So I am sorry I forgot about that, Derek. It's probably in my list of topics to cover, and I just haven't gotten to it yet. So but yeah, definitely I'll have to do that at some point as well. But yeah, really really neat story there, and it does seem like it was a ghost ship of some kind, whether it's literally a ghost ship or whatever that was. Um yeah, the list of topics is long. That's true. You would think it would start to shrink, but over time it just keeps getting bigger. So even when I cover certain things, it just you cover one thing and two more pop up. It seems like so. But yeah, yeah, neat story there, and
Very neat.
yeah, very good points there about the history, all that, and yeah. So okay, well, I will start reading this next story here. Um, I found all these this morning. I really the main place I look for these is Reddit. Actually, at this point, I found a few websites that have stories, but they don't get updated nearly as much as these particular forums in Reddit do. So that's where I've been going for a lot of these stories. And so let's see here. I'll get started on this next one. This one says, I'm gonna try to keep it short. So a few years ago, my dad took me to school and went to work. After I finished my classes, I went home. Keep in mind, the door was locked. I unlocked it and saw my dad just standing there, doing nothing, just standing. It seemed weird since his car wasn't parked and the doors were locked. I asked him how was his day, but he didn't answer. Instead, he gave me a weird look. I went to my room and changed my clothes, and when I came back, he was gone. I knew something wasn't right, so I tried looking for him, but he wasn't anywhere. So I called him. He picked up and I asked him, "Where'd you go?" He told me he's at work until later that day. I froze for a few minutes when I realized that wasn't him. Who was it? What is that supposed to mean? And that's where that story ends.
Oh my God, that's so creepy. You know, I don't know. It makes me think that either his act, like maybe his father was doing some. You've heard of that bilocation thing, and
Mm,
there are many accounts of that. I mean, there could be that he somehow wasn't even aware that. I think Aleister Crowley mentions that too at some point that he was reportedly capable of doing bilocation, but like he would never know when he was doing it. It could be something like that, or even the doppelganger thing, I guess. Which is what's weird about that though is that the father didn't see himself, the son saw it. So I thought that that's very interesting as far as the idea of it being like the, you know, some reports of the shadow, like the shadow self being the doppelganger. So in this instance, I think it'd be very unusual that the son should see his son, like his father's shadow self. So I don't think it would be something quite like that. But it's very, but there also, I mean, it couldn't have been a physical person like the clone idea, you know, because the door was locked. So the person, I mean, and then they disappeared. So, and they looked, the same clothes, that kind of thing. And it sounds like the apparition seemed confused, or the weird look anyway. I don't know exactly what kind of weird look it was, but oh, that's super creepy.
yeah, the bilocation thing does. It seems to make sense if, especially if they weren't, if the father wasn't aware that he was even doing that. Maybe maybe when their kid, whoever it was, didn't really say son or daughter, but whoever it was, the writer of the story, when they spoke to him, he he maybe didn't even necessarily fully register it. It was more of something maybe it didn't come through clearly to him, and or maybe it did, and it sort of shocked him back to just being in one location somehow.
I don't
Um,
know.
yeah, yeah.
It's weird. It's weird too because other cultures talk about this kind of thing, and it's not quite like a doppelganger in some of these instances. It's like it's kind of like in Norse mythology and like uh, in those like Finland, I think has an account of it too, where it's kind of an idea of like an apparition of sorts of the person going ahead of the person, and people will see like for example, someone walk through the door and they think they've come inside the house, but they haven't yet, but they're fixing to, and they do thereafter a little shortly after. And that's interesting because he was standing inside the house as if he'd just come in, but the door was locked. But then he said he'd be coming home a little later. So I wonder if it could be something like that even. But regardless, there are accounts of this. So I hope that I don't know. That's super creepy though. Just the idea of walking in and seeing your parent sitting, standing there. All creepy. So I think that's a really good story.
Yeah, maybe the father was thinking of coming home, thinking of or looking forward to coming home, and somehow those thoughts made that image of himself there. That seems possible.
Oh my gosh, yes. Or maybe
Yeah,
even like a teleportation thing for like a moment or something. And then I don't know, but I like that idea right there that he was thinking about it so strongly that their child saw them there. So their son or daughter saw them there. It's I don't know. It's just that's fascinating.
yeah, neat story there for sure.
Yep.
Um, yeah. So, all right. Well, let me get to this next one here. This one, here. So this one says, my sister went into my mom's after I'm guessing the mom, after she passed, and thought a cat would be a nice addition. She went to the doctor and picked out her kitty. I this was April. I go over there often because I'm 5 minutes away, and there's something I noticed about the cat, and kind of joked to my sister. I said it's so funny, and I don't know how she does it. She must be a ninja. Every time I go upstairs to use the bathroom, Rusty, which is the cat's name, I guess, is napping on the guest bed. And then I go downstairs and she's in the living room. She laughed. She must be. I guess that's the sister talking. So my husband was with me today and he asked how she was upstairs and downstairs at the same time. I never said anything to him before this. She must be fast. My sister today said she is acting weird and started staring at nothing. Then I brought up the fact that she's always upstairs and downstairs. And there's a lovey Rusty, and there's a leave me alone Rusty. She's at work now, and we will do a FaceTime experiment next time I go over there. I will go upstairs and see if she's on the bed, and my sister will see if she's downstairs at the same time. Anyone heard of this or have any other explanation? And that's where that story ends. And I read this and I had to share it because of a similar experience I've had with my own cat, where I saw her walk one way, and I live in a small apartment. There's only one hallway that connects everything. And I saw her walk towards the front through that little hallway. And then not even a minute later, she came out from the opposite end of the apartment from behind the vertical blinds at the window. So I saw her in two different places where there was no way she could have gotten back to the window behind those blinds without me seeing her because I was looking at the hallway. And that happened twice over the years. So I don't know if she astral projected or teleported or
I
what she
don't know.
did.
I don't know, but cats are just, they're so odd and kind of, well, they're magical in a way. They seem supernatural in so many accounts like this. Well, we know that they have their own natural, like they can sense so much anyway, and they can, like predict weather, and they can predict, like most animals, but earthquakes and things like that, they can seem to tell when their owners are going to come home. I've heard accounts of that. People say they can see ghosts. So I don't know. I think that cats are something bordering, or they're somehow walking that line of the supernatural in and of themselves. They're just very incredible creatures. And I think it's, you think about Egypt and the way that the Egyptians thought about the cats and the way that they had them in all their temples and palaces. And then the way that everybody all over the world has all kinds of different strange ideas about what cats, omens, importance about cats. I think that they do have some type of abilities. I'm not sure exactly what, but the idea of the being in two places at once, I think it's very, I don't know. I wouldn't dismiss it. It seems possible if they, but I guess I would like to see what kind of experiment and if it did turn anything up. But like you said with your own story, it just doesn't seem possible. It's like they walk through like a wormhole or something, and then they're in one spot, and then instantly in another spot without actually not having to, you know, I don't know. It could have been very
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Yep. Yeah. Um, no, I know. And the only bad part of that story, the only part that makes me sad is that they didn't do that experiment and then write the story. I want to know how that experiment went, but
Me too.
it doesn't say. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's the only
The other
sad part to that.
it's weird too that they got the cat from a shelter. So it makes you like your imagination kind of wander about like so the cat runs up in the shelter and for, I guess whatever reasons, no telling. Then they pick up this cat. So I mean, I don't know. I would be thinking the cat was strange too. I'd be like, there's something funny about that cat. And you hear accounts of sometimes witches and stuff like that turning into cats. So I don't know. It could be anything, but that's a good story. I wish they had done the experiment though. I agree.
Yeah, I was reading it and I was like, oh well, this should be. I'm looking forward to seeing it, and then it just ends with like, no, well, no, I want to know how it worked, But
Yeah.
oh well, that happens. So yeah, neat story. It's right there. So let me go to this next one here, and I'll get this one going. This one says 1994, and it gives a name of a city. I won't mention it here, but California, United States, just after sundown. Says my dad was driving with me in the front passenger side of the bench seat of his old 1964 Oldsmobile along a dark back road in a small town. All of a sudden, straight in front of us, the headlights lit up a little boy. He was roughly 6 or 7 years of age, with blond hair and blue eyes, wearing a striped shirt, a blue windbreaker, blue jeans, tennis shoes, and a baseball cap, just standing in front of us, staring right through the windshield at us or beyond us. My dad slammed on the brakes, so our heads kind of dipped forward and down as the car lurched. When we looked back up, in place of the boy was a deer. It looked at us and then ran off into the woods. My dad turned to look at me and asked, "Wasn't that a little boy?" I replied, "Yes." And he said, "Okay." Turned to look at the road and drove on. And that's where that story ends.
Ah, it's crazy. I've never heard anything like that. I've never heard of somebody, especially like a child. I mean, there's of course there's all these shape-shifting stories, right? But I've never heard of like a little boy dressed in modern clothing. But it's interesting though about the deer thing that they mentioned there that the child was kind of frozen in the light of the car or, in front of the car anyway, the way that a deer does. I don't even I can't even begin to understand exactly what was going on there. I mean, of course you initially think shape-shifting, but and there are accounts I've heard of, Native American accounts of deer people and stuff like that. But usually it's like a reports they're, like a grown woman or a grown man, and they're still usually seen as being part deer. But this is like he was in a windbreaker and I think they say a ball cap and
Yeah.
jeans and sneakers.
Yep.
That's just I've never heard anything like that. That is crazy.
Yeah.
Amazing.
It's just makes me wonder, were they seeing the spirit of a boy and then somehow when they looked down it just vanished and they happened to be I mean that's quite the timing if that was just the spirit that was there and then vanished. But then this deer happened to be going by at the same time. And
Yeah.
but they didn't see the deer. So it does seem like there's some kind of connection, but it's hard to say what it was.
Yes. I've never heard of I mean, of course shape shifting, like I say, but to be fully clothed in modern clothing, a windbreaker, sneakers and jeans and a ball cap just in the middle of the road too. I don't know. And just because they come I guess well, I don't know. Did they come up on him or did he run out of the I don't know. It's very you can't really tell from the story what the case was, but I don't
Yeah, I don't know about that either. Um, I think you cut out just for a second there,
more
Jessica. Oops, there we go. Now you're back.
oh, oh sorry.
That's okay.
Um it would make more sense, I think, if I heard the story and like they saw a woman and a woman, like in a I don't know, like a dress or something like some old-fashioned white dress, and then they saw a deer. But or they saw like a man and he was like, I don't know, naked or something, and then they saw a deer. But this is crazy because, and I wonder sometimes about the truth, like versus fiction. Sometimes it's much stranger, and I agree that it is because I think that you would maybe stretch the truth a little bit to make it sound more believable. Because so I do think there's something to this because I think it's so strange that it was a little boy too, like 6, 7, maybe 8, I don't know, but that age range, but dressed in full modern clothing like that, and then just in a split second to transform into a deer. That's an amazing story. I wonder where it happened. Did it say? Like what
Small town in California.
California, that's what it was.
Yeah,
Ooh,
yeah.
well, like with the Skinwalker stuff, but this is weird though, because this is like it doesn't even, see, I can't even think of where you would take with this because it's an incredibly bizarre story. One of a kind too. I've never heard anything like that. Have you?
No, but you know what's making me think of is something similar, possibly to maybe what I experienced, where this boy was projecting, or whoever this was projecting into the minds of the people that saw him or saw it. And so it didn't have to physically change into a deer. And I'm looking at the chat here, it could have been a spirit boy that wanted to be a deer. But it could have been, maybe it was the same thing, just projecting differently to the minds of the people that were there. And all it took was that split second to just change the image slightly, to from a boy to a deer like that. And
Yeah,
maybe it just ran off, and it was the same being, and it was more of a mental or spiritual vision than it was a physical one.
right. I don't know. That's incredible, and they both saw the same thing.
Hmm.
So if and I wonder, but this either if it was the spirit of a boy, I don't know about the deer itself. Was like I don't know. That's an incredible story.
Yeah, yeah. Looking at the chat here, Derek says deer are a common screen memory too, and that's a reference to more alien UFO stuff as well, I believe.
Hmm.
Um, so lots of possibilities there, I guess, as to what it could have been. So yeah, a lot of great thoughts. That's why I always like doing
But
these chats here, the streams live, because when you get people in here, they can add to it. And yeah, Derek says Mike Cleland. I can say that name. Mike Cleland wrote a book about aliens, orbs, and owls, and then also deer are a common thing that they use. So yeah, that's lots of possibilities there.
maybe they were abducted, like just there in that one split second or something, or lost time, or they saw something. Yeah, I think it could be, or some type of paranormal activity occurring right there. That's amazing. Good take, Derek.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, Especially if they didn't really say they had like they didn't say they had clocks, or they knew what time it was when they saw this or what time it was after. So that's possible. So
Yeah,
um
there's no telling. I mean, but
yeah.
that is such it's unusual, like one of the most unusual stories I've ever heard, and completely unexpected too, that it turns into a deer. Very strange.
Yeah. And Derek says at the end of this, we'll move on in a second, but Derek says, or some type of pan, that's the entity, trickster entity. So maybe there's that too. But
Yeah, it could be.
yeah, yeah, neat story there.
Mm-hmm, for sure.
Well, I'll go on with this next one. We have two more to go. And this one says, so this is not my story, but it's my boyfriend's. When my boyfriend was little, he used to see this little girl with pigtails. She would sit at the end of his bed. I've asked him if he would talk to her, but he only remembers her sitting there. She visited him for some time, and after a while it stopped. A few weeks later, he heard his mom talking to his dad about his neighbor. The neighbor had told his mom about this girl he saw with pigtails, and that he asked her to leave, and she did. So it's not really a crazy story, but it's the first one this close to me that's actually been witnessed by multiple people. My boyfriend never told his mother until he heard that story about his neighbor. They had no idea they both saw this girl until then. And that's where that one ends.
So I wonder if
So,
it was happening at both places at the same time, or if it was happening in one place and then went to the new house, the neighbor's house, or if it's some type of like just a regional phenomena, like a kind of like a localized Hatman type thing or something, where people are seeing the same type of apparition in their rooms. That's cool. Weird story.
it is, and I like that it's there was this figure scene, this little girl figure scene, but I mean, nothing really happened. It just was there, and obviously the neighbor didn't care for it. So, but still, that's neat that it was just someone that was there, and yeah, who's to say if it moved on from the neighbor or if it was visiting both of them around the same time? Hard to say with that, but the fact that there wasn't this corroboration until years after, to me, it kind of rules out the people there getting too freaked out and maybe accidentally or exaggerating or like basically trying to make connections that aren't there. At the time it's happening, if there's none of that because that no one talked about it at the time.
Right. I always wonder too, like, why is it that they're always sitting on the bed? Like that's that it's so common that they talk about that. People talk about seeing a spirit or an apparition, or even it looks like it's physical, like you could touch it or something, but they're just sitting at the end of the bed. I don't know what that's about, but it's so common. It's like they're either standing at the end of the bed or they're sitting on the bed while the person's trying to go to sleep. It makes sense because in that relaxed state, they may be more perceptive to seeing those things, or the spirit may not feel threatened and it might approach them in this type of relaxed state where they feel, you know, it's not very threatening or anything. But wanting to be seen and wanting to be seen, you know, in kind of a calm way, it's very strange. It could have been the spirit of a little girl. It could have been some type of there's a lot of references to these types of entities in folklore too that appear around sleeping, in a sleep environment and to do with dreams or projections and things like that. But it does seem kind of like it was just a spirit. And it's so common for people. Same thing as the closet. People report seeing the spirit, in a closet or, and I'm assuming these are probably kids. I don't know. I think I missed that part, but
Yeah, it doesn't really say. It just says the neighbor, but
yeah,
it could have been kids. It's yeah.
I don't
Huh.
know. But interesting that it's sitting on the end of their bed instead of like run it, in both these cases. Or was it? I'm actually, did he just
Yeah,
see it on? So both
there's
of them
n-
saw it.
there's no details about the neighbor's sighting.
Oh, he
Um,
just they saw it.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So yeah, then
But for the
that's
first one, it's interesting. And I don't know. I think it's a cool story that two people reporting the same thing in different locations, but nearby the same area. So I definitely and with no way to cross reference or to project the idea into the other one. I think it's an excellent um, bit of you know to kind of stow away as it sounds like they did experience it. That's amazing. Great story.
yeah, yeah. I thought that was neat too. So I have one more story. This is probably the longest one out of all these. Um, and it's going to reference a name. I'm just going to again with these stories, I always leave out names of people. I just use initials a lot of times. So, but I'll just read the story and the way I usually do, and it's a little bit longer. So, but I will. I'll get this going, and then we'll talk about it. So, this one says, my wife and I moved into our old house in New England in summer of 2000. We had looked at dozens of houses, but this one just immediately felt, quote, like home, end of quotation marks. Soon after, we invited our good friend S and his husband up for a weekend. Keep S and his husband in mind. We were pretty well into getting our late night party on, playing cards, drinking, smoking in the dining room. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw, though the experience was more like perceived, very vividly an older woman with jet black hair sitting next to the old upright piano in the corner. The piano came with the house. We specifically requested that the previous owner include it in the sale because it was so cool and we didn't have much furniture. It wasn't even slightly scary. In fact, it was just like she was hanging out. I mentioned it to everyone, and we laughed it off. Drinking and fun continued through the night. I was never really a ghost believer, and still a skeptic 100%. But the rest of this story makes me really wonder. Several weeks later, we met a neighbor from down the street who lived in the neighborhood for 45 years. They said, you live in the M. King house, she tells us. M was a really interesting lady. She was a famous fashion designer in the 1930s that lived there alone after her husband passed away. Very tragic, but she was an interesting lady, very independent and ahead of her time. She traveled all over the world. She was Greek, I think. Greek? I asked. Weird question, but did she have black hair? Yes, she had jet black hair even when she was an old woman. It was very striking. Yep, I got the chills right there. Many weeks later, I met another neighbor from down the street that had lived there for 60 plus years, and he starts telling me about M. She was a famous fashion designer. She designed gowns for Rita Hayworth and all the classic film stars, and she designed costumes for Broadway plays too. Her parties were legendary, he tells me. She used to have all her gay boyfriends from Broadway come up on the train and they drink and sing show tunes at the piano in the dining room all night long. Yep. Now this could all be coincidental, but it just seems too much so. But she must have been an awesome woman. People from around town have given us some of her original drawings and even an unfinished dress she was working on. There haven't been any more M sightings, but shortly after my wife got pregnant 20 years ago, we both woke up out of a cold sleep at the same time and looked at each other like, what the heck? And then our bedroom door slammed hard. We like to think that M wasn't a fan of kids. She never had any of her own. So she was like, later, I'm out of here. That's my story. Thanks for reading. So and that's where that one ends.
Yeah, that's incredibly weird. It sounds like a haunted house. I mean, classic. But the weird thing though, it's kind of more than that. I think it's interesting that they about the piano thing and that it was left behind. So you have this piano of hers that she must have spent a lot of time, you know, on, I would assume. And in her house too, living there for a long time and having all those good times. But maybe the place was just infused with her essence in a way, so much so that you could see her. Or, like so many people say, even in the afterlife, she was still inhabiting the home sometimes or all the time, I don't know. But it's almost like, too, when they described that they felt like it was home when they first came in. I wonder if the spirits have anything to do with that, too, of making them like picking kind of who they want to sort of live there. Because the people seem to kind of fit, maybe the atmosphere and able to create the kind of atmosphere she might like to live in still, or not live in, but experience in the afterlife in her own home. Super cool story.
Yeah, I thought that as well. I do think there's something to, and it goes against the usual Hollywood angle of everything, but I think people can stay in places where they had a lot of good memories, and I don't see why they couldn't use that as a part of their own. Let's say heaven, not in the religious sense, but just the place where they want to be.
Right.
Um, yeah, and so Um, I think it could go either way. It can be positive or negative. I think in this case, it seemed definitely to be positive, and I also love that maybe once she realized there was going to be kids in the picture, maybe it's hard to say just based on a closing door, but maybe the writer was correct. Maybe she decided, well, okay, time for me to go, and
Right.
it's hard to say, but and I like that the sightings were never scary. They were just, and it was only that one time, really. And but yeah, the house is known in the neighborhood for its history and but yeah, really neat
And then
story.
people kept bringing stuff of hers too. That's I don't know. There's still like a lot of commemoration of her, and then she spent so much time in the home and had so many apparently famous parties and all of this. So I do think that I don't know. Maybe it was just a part of where she I don't know if well, they said they didn't see her again. She could still be there, I guess, or maybe she comes and goes. But that's a great famous ghost story type of thing, and a lot of fun for sure.
Yeah, APOC in the chat here says also they could have been feeling what she felt about her home, empathetic. So yeah, that makes sense. And about the spirits picking the people that move to their homes, I think that can also, I do think that's possible, and that they can help maybe draw people to their these places, and depending on what they, I mean, that's really amazing when you think about it, that maybe these people, when they're viewing these houses, the spirits are there and checking the people out, and
Right.
trying to
Kind of like an
figure out.
inner. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's a neat idea in a way. Um, could be potentially scary depending on the former owner of the home, I guess, as well, depending on the situation. But
The
um,
motivation.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, but still neat. I love that story too. I thought it was really nice example of a ghost story that wasn't terrifying, and so and then yeah, that connection to really to local history and film history, I guess, as well. So yeah, I thought that was a neat way to round out the show today.
Yes, I think too, like you said, that it's not scary at all in that case. It's just it's a nice tribute to the idea that maybe, for people who like to believe that in the afterlife, you kind of get to choose where you're going to be or how long you're going to be there, or, maybe there's a lot more choice in it in the afterlife. And that's kind of, I think that's something that a lot of people find very encouraging and some people feel uncomfortable with. I don't know, but it does have like an interesting edge to it, and that it's not always just that the spirit is up to no good. And that's the only reason people see spirits, and that's not always the case. I think it's a wonderful example of that. So, yeah, great story to end the show with for sure.
Yeah, well, thank you for joining me again, and this was a lot of fun.
Yes,
So
thank you for having me. Have a great
yeah,
night.
you as well. You as well. And so I was talking with Derek mentioned in the chat earlier that we are good for a another comic book review episode on Wednesday. So that will be fun, and looking forward to that. So, and then of course Friday will be more paranormal news. So, thank you all for being here, and we will talk to you on the next episode of Salcedo Paranormal on Wednesday. Take care, everyone.